Welcome back. It's the first day of the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland. This year's meeting is expected to cover the explosion in artificial intelligence and how leaders should think about innovation and regulation. The event is taking place at a time of polycrisis, a term that describes the coming together of multiple crises, such as the climate and biodiversity crises, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the war in Ukraine and including 800 CEOs and 60 heads of government. Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima is leading the Nigerian delegation, with the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy of Nigeria, Mr. Wale Edun, also making the list. Earlier, he spoke to our correspondent, Juliana Oleyinka, on what to expect.
Well, we're here this week, led by His Excellency, the Vice President Kashim Shettima, leading the Nigerian delegation to this all-important dialogue. We have made it a point to be part of the conversation, to be in the room all around the world this year, from the Paris Financing Summit all the way through to, of course, UNGA and COP28, not forgetting the World Bank annual meetings. I think the important topics of the day now are climate change and more and more generative AI, or artificial intelligence in particular. And it's important that we as Nigerians are here. We are the largest country in Africa. We do have an important role to play. And so we're here to make our voices heard and to also tell our own story of progress, our own story of making Nigeria an investment destination.
And to U.S. politics now, and the Iowa caucus is top on the minds of Republicans, who will get a chance to decide who becomes the party's presidential nominee at the elections later this year. So right now, there are 4 imposing candidates. Former President Donald Trump, who continues to tower over the party's future, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, whose penchant for cultural clashes led him to declare that his state is where woke goes to die, and former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who launched her presidential campaign in February 2023, calling for a generation of leadership in the Republican Party, and tech entrepreneur and author Vivek Ramaswamy, who is focused on combating woke ideology, exposing government corruption, and ushering in younger generation voters into the Republican Party. Right now, each candidate is making their final pitches before decision time, focused on issues such as immigration, the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, and the U.S. economy. The South Pacific nation of Nauru has announced it's severing diplomatic ties with Taiwan and would instead recognize China. President David Adjang made the announcement earlier today in a national address posted to an official Facebook page, explaining the government's decision to recognize the People's Republic of China. The announcement comes as Taiwan elected a new president on Saturday. William Lai received congratulatory messages from leaders around the world, including the United States, which made a statement through Secretary of State Antony Blinken, much to China's chagrin. The Nauru government says its decision is in its best interest and is in no way intended to affect existing warm relations with other countries. And a volcano has erupted near the southwestern Icelandic town of Grindavik, sending lava spilling into the town and setting houses on fire. Defenses built after an eruption in December partially contained the lava, but some were breached after 2 fissures opened. The volcanic activity appeared to slow overnight, with less lava flowing this afternoon, according to authorities. Grindavik was evacuated in November after a different eruption, but some residents had been allowed home. Iceland has more than 30 active volcano systems.
So we had this volcanic eruption starting today, this morning, very close to the town of Grindavik. What we have seen developing through the day is that the barriers that we are building to protect Grindavik are serving their purpose. So a part of the lava flow is being directed in another direction. But then we had a new fissure opening up within the town at noon, where we see lava flowing out, and it has already reached several houses in the town. So it's a very serious situation. Obviously, this is really changing the whole setup, because we were announcing yesterday that we were mostly worried about the fissures and ruptures underneath the town. But now we have a volcanic eruption just really within the town, which is highly serious. The government is meeting tomorrow. Obviously, we will be prolonging our support to pay salaries, to pay housing costs, but we will also increase our efforts to provide more housing for the people of Grindavik, which have found it difficult to find housing in a very difficult housing market here in the capital area. We will also decide on some support for the companies in the town, and we will continue as we can to build barriers to protect the town as much as we can.
And Voice of America's Henry Ridwell is in London, from where he is monitoring developments in Iceland. Henry, welcome to the program. Now, if people had been evacuated, thank you. If people had been evacuated since November, did that help in any way with the number of casualties resulting from the lava spill?
Yeah, it certainly did, and the authorities were very cautious after that first eruption and the first signs of seismic activity to try to make sure that the majority of residents were evacuated from the fishing town. We understand that there were around 200 residents left in the town, some of whom had refused to leave, some of whom were involved in the construction efforts around the town of that levee that was being built to try to prevent the lava flows entering the settlement. But certainly we understand that there were relatively very few people left in the town. You would have seen from those extraordinary aerial pictures that you've been showing that the lava flows from those fissures that opened up just entered really the northern sector of the town. They destroyed a few of the houses there, but fortunately the flows and the fissures weren't large enough to get further into the town itself.
Okay, so you tell us a little bit more about what type of damage and what happened in the town after the lava had erupted.
Yeah, well, this was two new fissures that opened. Of course, the first eruption was within the last 4 weeks. I was speaking to you just a few weeks ago before Christmas when that first eruption happened and the town began to be evacuated of its residents. There was another eruption on Sunday from that original fissure, and then two new cracks opened in the Earth's surface. Firstly, one a small distance north of the town, which seemingly at that stage did not pose too much danger to the buildings in the town itself. And then the one that really took everyone by surprise was a smaller fissure that opened up just pretty much within the town limits itself, and it was the flow from that fissure that entered the northern extremities of Grindavik town, and the lava flow set alight at least 3 houses in the north of the town, completely destroying them. If you look at the pictures now, those red orange lava flows that were flowing on Sunday through the town itself have now turned to black ash. Seismologists say that the flows on the surface have reduced significantly. We understand that the banks that were built around the town following that first eruption a month ago did help very much to divert the lava flows away from the main body of the settlement itself, and did manage to prevent a lot of damage to the town. But where the level of the bank was a little lower, where it wasn't quite complete, the lava overtopped the bank, and that's where the damage was caused. Now, it's not just the threat of the lava itself and the danger to life and the danger to the built environment. The lava, we understand, has also severed the hot water pipes that take most of the heating and hot water into the town itself, rendering the town itself pretty much uninhabitable. You can imagine at this time of year, the temperatures in Iceland are normally several degrees below freezing. So therefore, there is an urgent need to relocate those some 3,800 residents. Most of them have been staying on other parts of Iceland with friends and family, perhaps in rented accommodation. But I think that what hearing from residents from the village itself, I think that the biggest realization from them is that they hoped initially it was a one-off eruption back in December and that they might be able to return to their homes. The fact that the lava flows have come much closer, that new fissures have opened, that the infrastructure of the town has been damaged, and that seismologists say that volcanic activity in this peninsula on the southwest of Iceland could continue for years, decades, even centuries more to come, could render the town uninhabitable for some time, and therefore their lives, their livelihoods, their families are, in many cases completely disrupted, and they're going to have to build entirely new lives in different parts of Iceland.
I want to know, are there other parts of Iceland affected by this incident?
Not in the same way as this small peninsula has been. This is the first time in around 800 years that there has been volcanic lava activity on this small peninsula. Other parts of Iceland, of course, are very much used to volcanic and seismic activity, earthquakes and volcanoes. You may remember back in 2010, the Eyjafjallajökull volcano in another part of Iceland erupted and disrupted flights across the northern hemisphere for several days. That hasn't happened on this occasion. There hasn't been any big eruption of gases or debris into the atmosphere so far, and the main airports in Iceland remain open. There was some fear back in December at the original eruption that there may be toxic gas clouds that could drift into other parts of Iceland, including the capital Reykjavik, which is only around 40 kilometers to the north east of the peninsula where the eruptions have been taking place. Those warnings aren't in place at the moment. This seems to be smaller lava flows that seemingly have subsided for the time being. The only other major threat apart from Grindavik itself is to a power plant, a geothermal power plant, where there are fears that the lava could flow to if there are further eruptions. For the time being, things look quieter, although GPS data and seismic data shows that the lava is flowing underneath the ground. So there are fears there could be further eruptions in the days ahead.
All right. Henry Ridwell, thank you so very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
And now we're going to go back to Juliana Olayinka for our correspondence on our meeting in Davos.
The 54th annual gathering of the World Economic Forum has kicked off today in Davos, which is a plush Swiss ski resort in Europe. As to be expected, there are hundreds of business leaders and politicians here, really to discuss the big issue of the day or of the year. And according to the WEF, President Borja Brenda, the big issue of this time is about rebuilding trust and how governments are going to be able to navigate around artificially led disinformation, misinformation that could do some really crucial damage to the polls this year. We know that this year is a record year for elections, affecting 60% of the global economy. The UK Prime Minister, of course, is expected to lose his position when Brits go to the polls later this year. But how is artificial intelligence going to impact that? That is a topic that they are going to discuss. Of course, they cannot do that without looking at the geopolitical backdrop. There are Western-led strikes in Yemen because of the swathe of attacks that have been witnessed along the Red Sea. Of course, there is still that ongoing battle in the Ukraine. I do believe President Volodymyr Zelensky will be here again to speak with delegates and I presume plead for more arms and for more aid. And then, of course, there is the massive headache of the war between Israel and Hamas. And those are political issues. Of course, this does affect the world economy, but there are economic issues that need to be discussed, like high interest rates, record high inflation. That does appear to be going down, but global growth is crawling. It's not going as fast as it should be. So those are the important issues of the day that are going to be discussed. But of course, WEF does have some negative connotations. I think you only need to go on social media platforms such as X, formerly known as Twitter, to have a look at some of the conspiracy theorists people are writing about the global elites who they believe use WEF and the setting specifically here in Davos to network, to schmooze, to have champagne and canapes, and not really tackle those domestic issues. So that is something that delegates will need to think about. In fact, I was speaking to the Honourable Minister of Finance, Mr. Wale Edun, earlier today, and I spoke to him about the theme Rebuilding Trust and how this impacts people in Nigeria. And he spoke about domestic revenue mobilization. He spoke about the presidential directives, of course, which means that delegates that are traveling with the president has been cut in half by 60%. So I think everybody who's here is aware of the fact that domestically, public appetite for business leaders and for politicians is low, but certainly they are in charge. And to tackle some of those pressing issues, they've got to gather and they've got to make sure that they're able to provide the certainty and the reassurance for individuals that they so desperately need, particularly as the entire world is going through an acute cost of living crisis. Monday today has been pretty light, actually, although I expected it's going to get much busier later in the week. We know, of course, the Nigeria delegation is being led by His Excellency the Vice President Kashim Shettima. Again, he is with a pretty small team, but they do have a robust engagement, and I do believe there is going to be a specific Nigerian night where they are able to tackle some of those domestic issues. But it is absolutely freezing. The altitude is high, but Channels TV, of course, are on the ground, and we will be bringing you all of the latest coverage from Davos as and when we have it. Juliana Olayinka reporting for Channels Television News in Davos.
Thousands of people have participated in rallies against France's contentious immigration law. The rallies took place in several cities on Sunday. More than 400 collectives, associations, unions, and political parties, including La France Insoumise, France Unbowed in English, called for demonstrations 11 days before the passage of the text before the Constitutional Council. Around 25,000 people braved the cold weather at Paris's Place de la République. Adopted by Parliament last December, the asylum immigration law marks a turning point and has been denounced by many unions and rights groups as the most regressive law in 40 years. It aims to restrict social aid payments to foreigners, calls into question the automaticity of the land laws, reestablishes an offensive of illegal residents, and sets up immigration quotas. Critics say it has many ideas that have been pushed by the far right, such as national preference, and will have terrible consequences on the lives of thousands of foreigners in France. They say the law also restricts right to stay, considerably increases repression, attacks the right to asylum, land rights, health care for foreigners, non-European students, and family reunification. The protest did not put a damper on preparations for the 20th edition of the world-renowned dog sledging event known as La Grande Odyssée Savoie-Mont Blanc. Participants were seen racing across the snow with their dogs during the unique event, which places cooperation between mushers and their four-legged teammates at the forefront. Nestled in the heart of the French Alps, La Grande Odyssée features 13 days of racing through a course which spans over 400 kilometers. More than 65 competitors race against the clock in 11 stages during the event, which sees as many as 600 dogs taking part. Since its inception in January 2005, the event has grown in popularity and is now considered one of the most demanding stage races in sledge racing. And that's it for The World Today. I'm Susan Illian. See you tomorrow.